Sonic the Hedgehog 3 began in gun facility in Tokyo. The facility happened to be holding Shadow, a powerful hedgehog, as officials ensured everything was intact and security was not breached. Shadow had been trapped there for a very long time, but on that night, he had a spark of consciousness and had memory of him holding a human girl just before he got captured. The officials noticed a breach in security, and as they tried to resolve it, they realized that Shadow had been awakened as he messed with their security systems, so the officials declared an emergency and gathered all their forces to recapture him. Well, Shadow had a unique ability as it enabled him to teleport as he took advantages of this, taking out any official that stands in his way. He was able to make his way out of the facility and ventured beyond. The scene changes to Tom and Maddie hosting a race for Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. The race had begun, and they were making their way to the finish line. Sonic was able to run as fast as possible and made it to the finish line, but was shocked that Knuckles and Tails made it before him. Still contemplating on how that was possible, Sonic realized they were just holograms, and as he rushed back to find out what they were up to, they all shouted happy birthday as they all celebrated the day Sonic first came to Earth, as it happened to change the life of Tom and Maddie forever. That's why they celebrated. Shadow arrived at the city, and as he saw on a board that it was year 2024, he was shocked as he had been captured for 50 years. It didn't take long as some officials appeared again to recapture him. Sonic and his family were camping out that night, enjoying marshmallows, when their attention was drawn to a descending chopper. Director Rockwell, along with other officials, came forward to request the assistance of the Hedgehogs due to an emergency in Tokyo. Sonic and the other Hedgehogs accepted their request as they entered the chopper headed for Tokyo. They arrived at Tokyo and they were horrified by the sight of burning buildings, so they geared up, and as the chopper arrived at a landing zone, they jumped out, and as they landed, the place was already a mess as people ran for their lives, and Knuckles even caught a vehicle about to crush them. Still wondering who was causing the damage, Shadow arrived as Sonic was surprised to see a hedgehog looking just like him. Shadow advised the Hedgehogs to leave before they got hurt, and as Sonic tried to reason with him, Knuckles was itching for a fight as he rushed towards him, but Shadow appeared to be stronger as he twists Knuckles' arm and teleports, giving Knuckles a beat down. Sonic decided to take him down together, but Knuckles teleported so fast as he defeated the Hedgehogs and rode off in his speed bike, warning them not to follow him. Sonic, determined to capture him, chased him with his super speed, trying to pin him down, but Shadow was so smart as he restrained Sonic to a wall, and they lost him. Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails met with Commander Walters in a bar asking who Shadow was. So Walters told the story of Shadow, how a meteor crashed in Oklahoma, a life form happened to be in it, and as they tested it, it turns out Shadow possessed a chaos energy so unstable, but as a scientist thought of a way to harness such energy. An accident occurred in the lab, claiming lot of life, as the professor in charge of the experiment was arrested while Shadow was captured, and as they didn't want to kill something so valuable, Commander ordered that they freeze Shadow until they can figure out what to do with him. They were still at it when what seemed to be Dr. Robotnik bots appeared and began firing out at them. The bot had them pinned when a strange man in a bike came around and took out the bots. Walters happened to be terribly injured, but before he breathes his last, he handed Sonic a key to the most powerful weapon ever, warning him to secure it so it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Director arrived as she searched for the key on Walter, and on realizing it was with the Hedgehog, decides to trace them to get it. Sonic and his team chase the guy on bike, and he revealed himself as Dr. Robotnik's assistant. He assured them that Dr. Robotnik wasn't responsible for the attack earlier, and decides to prove it to them by inviting them to the doctor's underwater lair. Sonic was surprised to see that Dr. Robotnik was still alive, but his assistant informed him that the doctor meant no harm. The assistant explained that someone had imitated Dr. Robotnik and stolen his technology for evil purposes. Wanting to bring the real villain down, Sonic formed an alliance with Dr. Robotnik, who had changed his appearance to resemble his old self. Shadow was working around the facility he was held in when he spotted a skate shoe and had flashbacks of Maria, how they first met in the lab. Maria was the only one who wasn't scared of Shadow, and in no time, they became friends and they played together, danced together, and also watched the stars together. The flashback was over as Shadow was reunited with the professor, but it was cut short by Sonic and his team, who arrived at the facility to capture the persons responsible for the attack earlier, but unknown to them, they were venturing into a trap. They divided into pairs except Knuckles, who was alone when he got ambushed and taken away by Shadow. Tails was paired with Robotnik's assistant, and they also appeared to be ambushed. Sonic was with Dr. Robotnik, but got separated along the line when he got ambushed by Shadow, leaving Robotnik, who was wandering around when he spotted his tech, and rushed to hug it. The professor who he imitated his tech met with Robotnik as the professor introduced himself as Jeremy Robotnik, the doctor's grandfather. Dr. Robotnik and Jeremy Robotnik realized they were more alike in every way, so Dr. Robotnik asked his grandfather why they haven't seen each other for 50 years, so his grandfather told him how he had been held captive the whole time. Sonic and his team were tied up as Sonic was shocked on realizing that there were two Robotnik. Shadow asked for the key he got from Walter, but he lied that he wasn't with it, but Shadow wasn't buying it, and retrieved it from him. The professor explained to his grandson Robotnik how, for his freedom, he created the greatest weapon on Earth as it could hit any target on Earth with precision. They needed one more key as they planned to use the weapon to destroy Gun headquarters once and for all. Before they left, Shadow activated a mini black hole as it began to consume everything around them. Knuckles held onto a rope with his teeth as they were almost consumed when Sonic acted fast and used one of Tails' boom tube, which teleported them away from the site. Dr. Robotnik, thinking Sonic was dead, was delighted with his grandfather for doing what he had been trying to do for years. Using a simulation, Dr. Robotnik relived all the time and activities he could have spent with his grandfather, making his assistant jealous as Dr. Robotnik behaved as though he didn't exist. Tom and Maddie were feeling lost without the Hedgehogs around when Sonic and his team arrived, still tied up and requesting their help, which they accepted. Tails drafted a plan to retrieve the second key from the Gun headquarters in London before Dr. Robotnik. He discovered that the headquarters had installed force fields and lasers both inside and outside, which would disintegrate Sonic if he tried to get in using his super speed. Therefore, they needed Tom and Maddie in disguise to enter the gun storage room and insert a USB drive for Tails to hack and deactivate the weapon system. Then, Sonic could retrieve the key. Shadow arrived in London with the professor and Dr. Robotnik, and as he spotted Gun headquarters, he wanted to rush and quite away, but the professor stopped him as they already had a well-mapped-out plan to retrieve the key. Sonic and his team arrived, and with the plan set, Tom and Maddie used hologram technology to disguise themselves and entered the headquarters. However, it turned out that the headquarters had tightened security since Shadow's escape, and they weren't initially allowed in. But Maddie played her character so well that they had no choice but to let them in. Tom and Maddie got into the storage room and inserted the drive, but it didn't seem to be working. After a second insertion, it finally activated. However, they soon realized that the professor had already inserted a drive of his own, as they had already gained access to the headquarters. They began making their way through the lasers, as they had already been deactivated. Sonic couldn't wait any longer, and with Tails' help, rushed in. Sonic reached the vault where the second key was kept, only to find that the Robotniks were already there. As they all tried to grab the key, both Sonic and the Robotniks were captured by an artificial gravity technology installed in the room. It appears Director Rockwell knew of their coming and planned to capture them. She also captured Tails, Tom and Maddie as the officials brought them to them. It was a case of emergency for them as they resorted to their final plan, which was Knuckles, who was on standby, and on getting the go-ahead, he broke into the headquarters unleashing destruction. Knuckles accidentally activated artificial gravity all around the room as everyone got trapped as Dr. Robotnik and Rockwell crawled around trying to get the key. The rocks above were about crushing them when Sonic broke out of the entrapment, defying gravity as he destroyed the rocks and deactivated the artificial gravity. Immediately, Director Rockwell made her way out with the second key when Tom had a brilliant idea. Using the hologram tech, he changed his appearance to that of Commander Walter. Rockwell was surprised to see him, and Tom took the opportunity to retrieve the key from her. At that very moment, Shadow arrived. Upon seeing Commander Walter, Shadow, filled with rage, struck him and took the key, only to realize it wasn't actually Walter. Sonic arrived with the others and stayed with Tom, who was hurt, while Shadow left the scene with the Robotniks. The Robotniks and Shadow arrived in the machine they had created as the professor's plan was set into motion as the machine ascended from underneath and flew right into space. Dr. Robotnik received a call from his assistant, warning him not to trust the professor, as he wasn't being completely honest. However, Dr. Robotnik refused to listen and fired his assistant. Tom was rushed to the hospital, with Maddie following, while Sonic, filled with rage, requested that Knuckles give him the emerald. Knuckles warned him that the emerald's power was beyond his control, but Sonic was ready to fight for it. Noticing Sonic's determination, Knuckles told him he had left the emerald with a guardian. Sonic teleported there, retrieved the emerald, and activated it, transforming in the process. He then left to find Shadow. Shadow, on the other hand, was skeptical about what the professor wanted to do, but the professor reminded him of what Gun had done to them. This triggered a flashback for Shadow, recalling how Gun's headquarters had pursued them in the facility in an attempt to capture him. As Shadow and Maria ran, soldiers fired at them, causing an explosion in one of the tubes that ended Maria's life. This memory filled Shadow with rage, and he began running in circles, filling the entire compartment with chaos energy. Dr. Robotnik soon realized that the professor wasn't just planning on destroying Gun, but was also intending to annihilate the entire planet and everyone on it, as he believed the human race was a failed experiment. Dr. Robotnik tried to convince him that they should just rule the planet instead, but the professor made it clear that he didn't care about Robotnik. The only thing he had cared about, Maria, was gone. He placed a time sequence of 10 minutes for activation, and as the professor and Shadow awaited complete annihilation, they spotted a bright light in the sky for a moment, and then Sonic busted Shadow out of the machine to avenge Tom. A huge fight ensued as Shadow punched the emerald out of Sonic, causing it to break into several pieces. Both Sonic and Shadow grabbed pieces of the emerald, which transformed them as they continued their intense battle. Shadow struck Sonic and told him they were more alike than he thought, as he too was seeking revenge. This angered Sonic, who lashed out at Shadow, striking him several times and nearly ending the fight. However, Sonic was able to control himself and stop the attack, realizing it wasn't the right way. Shadow wondered why Sonic hadn't finished him off, and Sonic explained that revenge only fills the mind with overwhelming rage. Shadow had a change of heart and realized he had screwed up as he left with Sonic to fix things. Back at the cannon, Dr. Robotnik and Professor Robotnik engaged in a serious confrontation. Dr. Robotnik didn't want the professor's plan to go forward, but the professor outsmarted him and destroyed the time sequence, preventing the doctor from stopping his plans. The professor then received an intruder alert. After checking his cameras, he realized that Shadow had betrayed him. Enraged, he sent out his robots to destroy them. Dr. Robotnik was hanging for dear life when the professor pushed him far off into space. The professor rejoiced, but unbeknownst to him, Knuckles and Tails arrived, saving the doc. Dr. Robotnik struck the professor, sending him into the chaos energy, and he was eliminated. Sonic, on the other hand, was still chased by bots as Shadow destroyed, and their focus were set at the massive laser which was set to destroy the Earth. The cannon fired as Sonic and Shadow held it with all their might, preventing it from reaching Earth, while Dr. Robotnik, Knuckles, and Tails tried steering the cannon to redirect the blast. Sonic couldn't hold on much longer as the effects of the emerald wore off, causing him to fall. Luckily, they were able to redirect the blast to a nearby planet. Sonic was falling straight to Earth when Tails obtained some boom tube ring from Knuckles and rushed to save Sonic. Shadow appeared before Dr. Robotnik, reminding him that their job wasn't over. The cannon still contained an enormous amount of chaos energy, making it unstable and on the verge of exploding, which would release large amounts of radioactive gas into Earth's atmosphere. The two of them worked together. Shadow began moving the cannon away from Earth while Dr. Robotnik activated the core defense stabilizers to contain the chaos energy long enough for Shadow to get it far from the planet. Dr. Robotnik uploaded his final live stream, thanking his assistant Stone for all his help. Just as the cannon exploded, it struck both Shadow and Dr. Robotnik. By then, Sonic and his team had already returned to Earth. Months later, Sonic and his family were camping on the outskirts of town. Tom was making progress in his recovery, and Sonic and the other hedgehogs decided to have one big race again. The end. Stay tuned for more mind-blowing recaps on its mythical, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.